saw him hovering. I seen my big brother hovering. I remember asking, is he dead? August 26, 1996, that was the day I should have started the second grade. He was just 12 years old when he hung himself. In our community, especially back then, we didn't discuss mental health.
We're taught to be strong, we're taught to keep it in this house. But God did not call us to simply survive.
The one thing about grief, it never goes away. For anyone who's lost a loved one, you're not alone. The pain that you've gone through by losing that loved one, use that as fuel. Find the purpose in your pain. When I file a wrongful death lawsuit, all of a sudden, the place gets cleaned up. I find myself doing the Lord's work. I really feel that God put me here so that way I can advocate for these people.
Welcome my guest, Josiah Graham. It's time for something that's just for us. It's time to unlock something new. I'm your host, Melvin Rodriguez, and you're tuned in to The Bless Code. Today we're breaking down how to move from just surviving, but to truly living by God's power. Josiah Graham, my brother, welcome to The Bless Code. Good to see you, man.
Hey, good to see you, brother.
Good to see you, brother. Man, my man.
I appreciate you
Yes,
having
sir,
me, man. I really appreciate you having me.
Man, bro, I want you to know, man, that I am extremely proud of you, brother, man. I am extremely proud of your courage, your tenacity, your risk-taking, your intentionality, your consistency, your discipline. And I offer that to you because oftentimes as men, as black men, we don't give us that. We don't give us our flowers. We don't celebrate us. And I just want you to know, from me to you, brother, I'm proud of you.
Man, I appreciate that.
And, as we think about the conversation that we're going to embark here, that I call the survival code, I think it's extremely important because we all are survivors. Our parents are survivors. Our grandparents are survivors. Quite frankly, we was always taught to survive and not thrive. And when you think about loss and surviving loss, and how do you get through loss? When you think about with loss that results into grief, and how do you deal with grief? How do you move forward from grief? Loss. But I've learned that loss can become the greatest teacher. Loss can become the greatest preparer for your future. And I love to understand just a bit about yourself and your story, because I think it's so significant and needed to be told in terms of what you had endured, but where you are now.
Absolutely.
And obviously what you may still deal with to this day. But I want to start out by just highlighting a brief on your story.
Absolutely.
And what loss was for you.
Absolutely. So, I was born and raised here in Fort Lauderdale, and I grew up in a hood area. I came from a two-parent household, so even though we were in the hood, I had it better than most of my friends. I had my father figure, my dad, who was a father figure to many of the kids in my neighborhood, because he was a youth pastor, and he just had a passion for helping all the kids in the neighborhood. So, everything was good. Everybody came to our house. We would always hang out and play. But, I had an older brother named Samuel Graham, Sammy, we call him Sammy. And, although I had this two-parent strong household, my father immigrated from Jamaica in the early 80s, and he married my mom, and they moved here
in
Jamaica.
Okay.
They got married in Jamaica. In fact, my dad was so religious and Christian. He had never, till this day, he's never been with anyone other than my mom. Yeah, so they were both virgins and got together. They met as teenagers.
Wow.
And they got married at like 24 years old.
Wow.
And he's never, as far as I know, as far as he claims, and they had 3 boys.
Wow.
They had Samuel, David, and me. But my older brother, Sam, he was always bullied.
Okay.
In elementary school, he was overweight. He was probably about 200 pounds at the age of 12. So on August 26, 1996, he should have been starting 6th grade. That was the back to school morning. You know, when you in school and you have, you know, the night before, you excited about the next day, you can't sleep. You always put your clothes out on the bed and then you get up in the morning. I did the same thing.
Okay.
So I'm 7 years old. I'm living in Melrose Park in Fort Lauderdale. I got my clothes all ironed out. And then I wake up on August 26th and I'm gonna start the 2nd grade. And he's supposed to start middle school, the 6th grade. But we can't find him. My mom and dad, we're looking everywhere. I'm looking in places that he couldn't possibly be, like in the cabinet. I'm just looking everywhere. I'm a child, I'm 7 years old, I don't know. And then my grandmother was visiting from Jamaica at the time, my dad's mother. And I remember she said, I think I see him in the backyard. And I remember I looked out a window and I'm 7 years old. It didn't make sense to me. I saw him hovering. You know, I seen my big brother hovering. And then my dad said, you know, they called me Josh. Josh, go grab a knife, grab a knife. And my brother had hung himself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, you know, I ran, I grabbed the knife.
And what age was this?
He was 12 years old.
At 12.
And I was 7. Yeah, so I ran, I grabbed the knife out of the kitchen. I ran outside, I gave it to my dad, and and there was a ladder right there that he had used. And my dad just cut him down, and we brought him into the living room like this, put him down and tried to do CPR. And I remember, all I remember is that, you know, I went outside to, you know, open the door for the police, but I remember having one of those doors that lock once you close it. And I remember I had locked myself outside and the police came and they were just beating down the door, and then my dad opened it and they came there, and, you know, there he was, lifeless.
Wow.
And, you know, I'm 7 years old. I'm just, I don't know what to think. And I remember one of this white female officer who was standing outside, and I remember saying, asking, you know, is he dead? And then she like started crying, and she hugged me, and she just shook her head like this. Yeah, man. So, man, it was rough, man. It was rough because, you know, I lost my big brother. I have another brother, but he's a middle child. And I don't know, maybe because of this situation, you know, sometimes I look back on it, you know, he was never close with me or any of my other family. And maybe that was his way of coping with trauma. I'm trying to remember back to how it was prior, but we never had like a big brother relationship. So from that moment, I found my big brothers in the streets. You know, I got, you know, somebody I consider like my big brother right now is doing like 20 years in prison.
Wow.
And he's the leader of like one of the biggest prison gangs in Florida that he created. And that was like, these are the people who were like my big brothers in my neighborhood.
And this one you were like as a teenager?
As I'm like 8, 9, 10,
Okay.
you know, so following along that path, you know, I was getting into a lot of trouble. Even though I was the kid who was smart, my dad always trained me to be a leader and not a follower. But, you know, when I lost that big brother, I gravitated towards the guys in my neighborhood, and I started breaking into houses and stuff. So at 12 years old, I then was arrested, caught red-handed, and, you know, committing a burglary with one of my friends. And I remember the police, they ran up on us this was on the corner of 441 and Briar Boulevard, and they had police dogs out there. I remember one of the plantation police officers said, man, why the fuck didn't you run? I wanted you to run so I could, you know, give my dog something to do. And I'm 12 years old. He's telling me that, you know, and he was like, oh, look, we got boys in the hood here. And so he said, as he's talking around their colleagues. And I remember just that feeling. And then I remember my dad, someone had alerted, because it's right side of my neighborhood. Someone must have told my dad what was going on. And my mom and dad, they drove out around there. And then my dad, he saw me in the back of a police car with my hands behind my back. And
you were 12 years old?
I was 12 years old, the same age that my brother had committed suicide.
Wow.
And I remember my dad just broke down crying, and he was like, man, I came all the way to this country to have kids, to give you a life that I didn't have. And now you become a jailbird is the word they use in Jamaica for somebody in and out of trouble. And I just remembered that look on his face, that it just broke me. And it was like, you know, he would always spank me, but it was like that look on his face was worse than any spanking, because at this point, I feel like I had just become a failure. So I'm arrested. This is my first offense, but I was lucky to get a second chance. So when I got arrested, the state attorney's office in Broward County, they said, man, this guy says the first offense, we're gonna send him to a diversion program. A diversion program is something, if you complete a set of rules, a set of things, and you complete it, then they'll wipe your record clean. So I did that, and I competed in this diversion program in something called teen court, where we had to do a mock trial. In that mock trial, I remember a judge seeing me and said, man, you are talented. You could be anything you want to be, man. What the fuck are you doing? Like, look at your grades. You're an honor roll student, but doing all this. You see, like the juxtaposition of, what are you doing in the streets versus what you're doing in school? And I remember he said, you could do anything you want to be. You could be a lawyer. And from that moment, I said, you know what? I want to be a lawyer.
Wow.
And I changed my life right after that arrest.
And you were at what age?
I was 12 years old.
At 12 years old.
I knew. So a lot of people, like, they realize they want to be a lawyer. It takes them, different careers. Some people realize in college or in high school. I knew since I was 12 years old.
Wow.
After doing that mock trial. And the interesting thing is this. So I got a second chance from the Broward County State Attorney's Office, the juvenile department, when they gave me a second chance to change my life, wipe my record clean. My very first job as an attorney was at the prosecutor's office in the juvenile department in Broward County, the same very unit that gave me that opportunity probably 15 years before.
Wow, that is, man, brother, that's extraordinary. And thank you for sharing that. And I think it's important that people hear of stories like that because, quite frankly, it is so common in our communities. And as we think about mental health and well-being of us as Black people, it was a real issue, and it's still a real issue. And in fact, in this current time, it's even at an all-time high in terms of the struggles and what we deal with as we're surviving the dynamics and the ways of this world and with social media and all these things. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course, man. Of course.
Now, there's a saying that's often articulated that time heals wound, and for you, it seems like what you have gone through or had been through, it had molded you into becoming this extraordinary leader in what you're doing right today. Well, a couple of things. How do you feel about that statement, and what do you ultimately feel? And I know you just mentioned about the gentleman and how he spoke life over you, but what do you feel was that thing on the inside of you that ultimately helped you shift your thinking, and it in spite of the loss, because that loss is that, and you live with that, for a lifetime.
Absolutely, man. So, and that's a really good question, and I think it's there's multiple layers to that. So I think my biggest motivation was my dad, because my dad is probably the best father that I can imagine. And when I was arrested, and when he would always spank me to the point where it would probably be considered abuse today. And I don't fault him for that, because that's how he was taught and that's what he knew. And but I remember coming home and he came to the precinct and picked me up, and he was crying, and I remember going home thinking I was about to get the worst ass whooping I've ever had in my life.
Right.
And I remember he just hugged me and cried and prayed over me. And it always stuck with me. I'm like, why didn't you spank me? Why you spanked me for so much less? And then it hit, as a 12-year-old, it just hit me. I thought this was so bad. In his head, this must have been so bad that, this is, no spanking can fix this. In my head, I'm thinking I must have failed so bad that this is beyond repair. So I sought out to prove him wrong. I sought out to no, Dad, trust me. This was just one mishap. Yes, you may think that, your son has become a failure, but I'm going to prove him wrong.
Okay.
So from that moment on, and seeing that look in his eyes of the disappointment and the hurt he must have felt, because he grew up rough in the streets of Kingston. He didn't have a pair of shoes until he was 17. You see what I'm saying? He didn't go to any school or formal education in high school until he was 17 years old. Wow. You see what I'm saying? So I'm like, he did all of this to have me over here and raising me the right way. I can't say that I didn't have a father figure, or I had that. Despite where we lived, I had that. So I sought out to show him that no, I did not turn away from your direction, from your instruction. I wanted to be like the prodigal son who, I remembered everything he taught me. So it's like everything he had been speaking over me and praying over me, it's like now that came to fruition, and I wanted to be that person that he so long been trying to get me to become. So that was the moment for me where I said, you know what, this is my opportunity to finally walk into that step. Right. And then, losing a brother, man, and having those big brother figures, a lot of them would say, man, Josiah, this is not you. This is not you. You're doing these things, but bro, like, look how your dad is trying to raise you. I had memorized the I Have a Dream speech at 9 years old, and I was reciting it everywhere in Broward County. From every single church in the Caribbean community, at the Broward County Performing Arts Center. And this is the person my dad was trying to mold me to become. And I was just fighting that, wanting to fit in because I had lost my brother.
Wow.
Right? Because I didn't have a big brother, and I missed that. And the big brothers that I was surrounded by just so happened to be the people in the streets.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? But when I finally just came and I just found my purpose.
Wow.
And I said, you know what? I have this judge telling me this isn't me. I have my friends telling me, man, you could be so much better than us. And I had my dad, who had been in the streets of Kingston until he was 17, raising me the right way. I finally just came to the understanding that, man, I'm gonna walk into my purpose. The one thing about grief, it never goes away. It never goes away. It's not like you can hit a switch and then you're all better. It just gets better with time. I would say focus on the good times, the good memories you had with your loved one, and find joy and comfort in those moments. The biggest takeaway is the pain that you've gone through by losing that loved one. Use that as fuel. Use that as fuel to energize you to go forward and become the person that you believe that your loved one would have wanted to see today.
When you think about what you just articulated, at some point in your life, you had a moment to think about what people were saying you should do, you shouldn't do, and vice versa, right?
Yep.
And you had a moment to where you had to make a decision, and you made a decision because I believe, as Scripture says, that many are called and few are chosen. And so for you, your father, for example, understood there was a calling on your life that he wanted to protect.
Absolutely.
Essentially. And then for you, you were kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Absolutely.
And you were battling the idea to fit in and so on and so forth, versus just being you.
Yep.
And as I think about that and think about the unfortunate situation you endured in losing your older brother to suicide, my question for you, Josiah, is, experiencing what you had gone through, how has that shifted your view around mental health for Black people, especially in our communities?
Yep.
Because for so many of us, or quite frankly, all of us, we're taught to survive, we're taught to be strong, we're taught to keep it in this house.
Yep.
And what goes on in this house stays in this house, and be silent about it. What's your view around that?
Man, and that's a great question. In our community, especially back then, we didn't discuss mental health, right? It was just looked at as, oh, if he has a problem, somebody may pray over it, but they didn't do the things like go out and seek professional help. You know what I mean? And I remember, and I was still young, and I remember my brother was bullied, and I wasn't there. I'm so much younger than him. I wasn't there to really protect him. But I remember him saying certain things that always stuck with me. And I'm like, I wish, that my parents heard that, or I would have spoken up and said that, or had him talk to someone. I remember the rope he used. I remember one time he had that rope, and I wanted to make a swing. And I remember, I remember asking him to use it to make a swing, and then him saying, don't worry, you're gonna get it back one day. And that always stuck with me, that in the moment, I thought that's what he meant, that he was, but I didn't say anything. And it's like these are the things, man, I just wish like I would have said something.
Mm-hmm.
I need a moment.
Yeah, no, I get it, man. I get it, man. That's it's something that we live with, and it never goes away.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost that for you, it's the idea that you're making them all proud
Yeah.
of who the man you've become.
Yeah.
Right? They're so proud of you. Your older brother is rejoicing and proud of you for making that decision and allowing his life and his situation to help mold you to who you are today.
I speak up now, man. So I remember in school, if anybody was being bullied, man, they couldn't do that around me. I was the big brother. I became that protector to a lot of the people who were bullied in middle school, at Parkway Middle, at South Plantation High. I would befriend people, not even if they weren't cool, or you know what I mean. I would be friends to that person because I always thought about what my brother must have been going through. You know what I mean. So that moment shifted me and changed my whole perspective. Until this very day, it's like I gravitate towards kids who are going through a lot. I have a lot of people who send bunch of their kids to me who I'll get them floor seats to the Heat game or the Dolphins, and it's because I try to be that big brother figure that my big brother didn't have,
right.
And I'm an advocate for mental health.
Right.
I was just on 99 Jams during Suicide Prevention Month, speaking out about that because it's important. And I think that if we go and we get mental health counseling, you know what I mean, if that's something that he could have gotten at the age, I think, a lot of things would have been different because when you're that young, you don't realize how short amount of time middle school and high school is, right? Had he known, like, hey, man, his whole mentality would have shifted. He wouldn't have cared about him being overweight in 4, 5, 6 more years. Probably would have bothered him, but it wouldn't have been as significant. What about if he would have started working out, or, you know what I mean? So these are the things that I try to instill upon, the youth now. And especially when I'm talking to my son, man, Christian. So I have a 4-year-old son. I try to instill that confidence in him, right? To let him know that, don't worry about the naysayers. Don't worry about what other people may think of you, and I think that's something that my brother lacked. So what I try to do is try to impart that on him now at this moment, so that way he never has to have the self-doubt, the self-consciousness, and worrying about what others think.
Right. That was going to be my my next segue in terms of going through what you have gone through, and even what you still may think about, and how you apply that to your own son, so that you're able to prepare him, for this journey, the life ahead, right? Because it's the things that we see and the unforeseen that we want to be prepared for, and I think that's kudos to you and what you're doing, and also I salute you for reaching out to those kids and being of a positive mental health advocate for them.
Absolutely.
Because quite frankly, when we think about the urban community and the stature of what we live up under in terms of poverty and lack of access and surviving to just make ends meet, and so dealing with those things that truly increases the issue around mental health is a real thing.
Absolutely.
Right? And
Absolutely.
it's at an all-time high, as I talked about earlier. So that's extraordinary what you're doing, because when you think about people, people can always give advice and they can say certain things in terms of laws and just get through it, just take a day at a time, but it's they never know until they've lived it or experienced.
Absolutely.
Right. And I believe that experience is the greatest teacher in this life, because once you have experience, then you can do what you're doing now and sharing that story, and sharing that experience. And what happens is I'm inspired, I'm led, I overcome now of what I'm dealing with because of your storytelling, and that's important. So one of the things, and I'll encourage you, and even for the listeners or viewers on this episode, is to embrace the blessing of release, because there is power in release, because I can't heal what I don't reveal. And so it's something that we struggle with as men. We're in the hiding. We're
like just now when I was crying, I felt like embarrassed, but it's
right.
like I should embrace that feeling of
it
it felt so much better.
Correct, because
when it came out.
Because when you embrace the blessing of release, it gives you and allows you to tap into your real inner strength and power, right? Because there is power in emotion, there is power in the tears, and when we carry that pressure, it breaks us, right? It doesn't allow us to truly tap into or live the life that God has called or chosen us to live.
Absolutely.
Because we live with this hurt, we live with this pain. But when you're able to sit down in a conversation, safe space, or what have you, but that is what gives you understanding. That's where healing comes and ultimately allows you to now help someone else, right?
You're not alone. Oftentimes when we're dealing with something, it feels so bad because we feel like we're the only ones going through it. Once you realize that there are countless people going through the same exact thing that you're going through and they've overcome it, that's such a great feeling. So I hope this message today, by seeing this message, you realized and seeing me so vulnerable that you can tap into that vulnerability as well. And it just feels so good to get it out, to talk to someone, to share what your past. And it's a constant journey that I'm still going through, to continue to share your story. And I promise you it gets better.
So that's extraordinary what you're doing, man. And I encourage you to continue to tell your story, man, because it's extremely inspiring.
And it's really helped me in my line of work because, and as I was mentioning to you, a lot of my cases deal with people who were killed, wrongful death cases. And, I have there's a lot of good lawyers out there and they could represent their clients just well. But there's something different when I'm dealing with a mother or a brother who lost a loved one.
Yeah.
And I could tap into that and I understand the feeling, right? And I understand, hey man, this is not just somebody who passed. No, this has affected a family, right? So I can advocate for them that much more.
Now let me ask you, that's what I want to ask you about. Is that the reason why? Because your practice in the legal field is exactly what?
So it's personal injury, but wrongful death. I focus a lot on wrongful death cases. So people who are killed in a car accident or a negligent security case where, let's say someone goes to a club and they don't have adequate security and someone gets a gun in there and shoots someone and kills them. So a lot of those cases are the cases I work on. And a lot of them affect the Black community. So when I was growing up where I did, I grew up right next to a housing project, right next door, and a lot of my friends were killed right there.
Wow.
And there was no security measures. And I had no idea that, these are the things they should have had at this place. And probably if he had those adequate security measures, it would have deterred certain crimes from happening. So when I became an attorney and I tapped into doing personal injury, I started focusing on those cases. In fact, my very first negligent security case was in 2019. And I had never done any negligent security case ever before. I had been working at a law firm for about a year doing personal injury. And then I got a call from one of my childhood friends. I went to middle school and high school with him. I got a call from his mother, and I'll never forget. Her son was killed on Father's Day in 2019, Jeffrey Brown, and he left behind 4 kids.
And this is 2019?
This is 2019. So that was my very first negligent security case, and I signed it up. And I taught myself negligent security. I had never sued an apartment complex for inadequate security. But when my childhood friends' parents came to me looking for help, I went and learned it. And I taught myself that. And I went to the apartment complex. I started surveilling, seeing that there was a broken fence and there was no security. And this fence that was broken there had been broken for 20 years. And I started interviewing different witnesses. And I filed a lawsuit and I settled that case for his family, for his children, for the policy limit, which was $2 million.
Wow.
And that was my very first negligent security case.
The very first?
My very first one. And I've been since, and I settled that case for $2 million. And till this day, I'm still in contact with his family. Wow. And that $2 million is gonna be there for his children. And it's growing and growing and growing in an annuity until they become of age, because they're all under the age of 10 years old.
Wow. You know, man, that's amazing how it feels like a 360 moment in terms of your experiences and what you're doing, but how you can truly relate to these cases, these situations with your story, and it gives your clients comfort in terms of the dynamics of trusting your credibility, being able to be an advocate for them. You know,
so when Jeffrey's mom is, or any other client's mom is grieving about the loss of a son, I remind them of what my mom went through.
Wow.
Right. And seeing her break down. So I tell them, it gets easier, it gets better. It never goes away, because this year is 29 years since my brother, passed. And every time there's August comes around, or anytime his birthday is June 1st comes around, my mom's in tears. Right. But it does get easier. And I understand how she can cope with the grief, and I know how she uses God as her stronghold to get through it. So I'm able to use that and it resonates with me, and then that's how I can share in the empathy of what they're going through.
So, and that's interesting. As you talked about faith with your mom, suicide often leaves questions that are never answered. And for you, how do you, or have you found peace to the unknown, and how and has that done something instrumentally to your faith?
Man, specifically about my brother. So that's an interesting question. I remember, right after this happened when I was 7 years old, my parents sent me to like this religious camp, and I remember one of the instructors, they were talking to me about my brother, this lady, and I'll never forget. And I'm like, why would she tell me this? She was like, well, he's in hell, right?
Wow.
Yeah, she told that, and I remember like crying and going to my parents and my dad saying, "Don't listen to her. That's not true." And that's something I always wonder, the unknown. But from my religious philosophy, I look at it as that he is in a greater place. He is in heaven, because he was a broken child. You see what I'm saying? And he didn't have the mental capacity to really fully understand what he was going through. And, I think that as a child, for someone to do that as a child, I don't think that, he's facing damnation. You see what I'm saying? So that's how I find peace, knowing that he's definitely in a better place.
Wow, that is, and so many survivors that have dealt with that. It's a real struggle, and it's a real struggle to not knowing, but when you think about what the Bible says, when you think about the battles, because it becomes a battle in terms of navigating in the way forward in life, right? You're trying to find out, I don't understand why.
Yeah.
But the reality is that we're not supposed to understand why. The Bible says to lean not towards your own understanding. And you're saying, okay, but this is the Bible says.
Yeah.
So if the Bible says that we have to align ourselves by faith to his word.
Absolutely.
And then it's the battle. Well, the battle doesn't belong to Josiah. It belongs to the Lord.
Absolutely.
The battle. So it's almost like when I think about that, it ultimately creates a path to peace. You're going to always remember and have thoughts.
Absolutely.
But it's almost that, okay, I know that God won't put us through anything we can't bear. This happened, and it hurted at that moment, but I found peace. But many men struggle, because what happens is, in going through that, the struggles of Black men, for example, how you just kind of got a bit emotional. Many men struggle to cry, to break down, to being vulnerable on what they're dealing with, right? Because I've learned this, that if you're seeking peace of mind, if you're seeking joy, if you're seeking all those things to find ways to go forward, you have to embrace the blessing of vulnerability.
Absolutely.
Because a Black man's vulnerability becomes the path to his victory.
Absolutely.
And so the victory that you now are blessed with is now the idea to where God gives you vision. God gives you understanding to your purpose. Like you talked about my purpose. I now understand my purpose.
Absolutely.
And so it's almost the idea when I learned to let go of some things and let God have his way and knowing that it wasn't my battle and understanding that what happened with my brother, it was hurtful in the flesh. And I love my brother. He was my big brother. But God,
Absolutely.
right? To God be the glory, but God. And so I want to build on that in terms of empathy. And did you, like for men who look like you, right? Look like you and maybe dealing with something similar or what have you, and they're struggling. What advice would you have for them?
With somebody going through what I went through?
Correct, something similar.
Yeah, I would say, man, use what you went through and find the purpose in that, right? So, turn that pain into purpose. So what I did was, how I grew up, and when I saw a lot of my friends getting killed, and I went through this with my brother, and then I went through this diversion program, and I was in the mock trial, all of that culminated into saying, you know what, I'm going to be an advocate for young Black boys, for people who look like me, right? So find the purpose in your pain. And that's what I did. And, when I went out and I started representing all my friends. I had a friend who was shot and killed in Lauderhill. I had a friend who was shot and killed in Pompano, in Miami. And now I'm close with their family because I'm their advocate. I've now become their voice. All of these senseless killings at apartment complexes, at shopping centers. I really feel that God put me here and put me through those situations so that way I can advocate for these people. So my advice would be to take any situation you've gone through and really ask yourself, what is God trying to teach me here? What is he preparing me for? And I really feel that I'm equipped and I'm prepared for battle. When I go into a courtroom and I'm representing a young Black boy who was gunned down in an apartment complex where some wealthy, slumlord lives in, Miami Beach, and they have so much complaints about prior shootings and robberies, and they don't give a damn. I say, you know what? I understand what they understand. What hurts them is not when, someone's get arrested or anything, but when you hit them in their pocket. So when I file a wrongful death lawsuit, all of a sudden, the place gets cleaned up. So I find myself doing the Lord's work by representing people who look like me, who were killed in these places, but then at the same time of giving their family financial justice, the place becomes safer for other people to live in those communities.
Wow, you know something? It's funny you say that, and I've been teaching this. Pain is fundamentally one of your most rewarding gifts. Pain, because it's almost like when you're experiencing pain and now you're going through it, and it's almost like the gift is wrapped up, right? There's a gift in this pain. So picture it. So picture the bow tie, the wrapping over the box, the pain, and now you're opening up the wrapping, right? And now once you open up the lid, and in this pain, the box, you see your purpose. In this pain, I see my purpose. And now I see, because then I was blind because I was hurt in this painful situation, but now I see my purpose.
Absolutely.
And when I understand my purpose, I understand who I am and whose I am.
Absolutely.
I know who I am. And so many of us, in particular as Black men, don't know who we are because we continue to live in our pain. We continue to allow what we had gone through and endured to control our current dynamics. And what happens is it materially hurts us, our wives, our children, because we're broken. We're broken. And so I think it's important. This is why this conversation is so important in terms of surviving, because it's a battle. We're constantly finding ways to survive through this pain. But it's almost like, Josiah, you ain't got to try to survive. All you have to do is be you. Be who I created you to be. And I want you to understand your purpose and what I created you to be in this life, right? The weight you're carrying, that pain, you don't have to carry it. Because when you do what? When you learn to open your mouth, I told you that closed mouth don't get fed, right? My word tells you that. When you learn to open your mouth and release, I give you understanding, right? That becomes therapeutic, right? And so I give you courage, I give you strength, I give you clarity, I give you now and then I see.
I tell this story because it doesn't matter if you're 12, 20, 32, 40, we're all dealing with something. We're all, struggling with some type of, whether it's identity, it's fitting in, or purpose. We all go through it. It's important that we don't shy away from the fact that we're going through that, but we find a way to deal with it. We find a way to talk to someone. It doesn't go away. Mental health is crucial, especially in our Black community. So, as Black boys and Black men, we need to focus on mental health and find a way to cope and find a community where you can share what you're going through.
So, let me ask you this. If your brother could see you now, what do you think he would say about the man you've become now?
You say, I'm proud of you. Man, he would be ecstatic. And the funny thing about my brother Sammy, even though he was bullied and scary, whenever it was a situation involving me, he was my superhero. He would show up. I remember this dude named Leroy who lived down the street, came up with he had a dog and he was sicking the dog on me, like joking, but I was scared. And my brother pushed me to the side and jumped out in front, right? And I remember countless situations like that where he would always try to protect me. And it would later confuse me. I'm saying, that flies in the face of how he normally was when someone was attacking him. But for whatever reason, when it involved me, he gained all the strength, right? So I think he would be so proud to see how his little brother has become, who grew up in the hood, and despite losing his big brother, despite getting arrested, despite every single one of his friends being either a convicted felon or something, going on to become a lawyer and representing young Black people, young Black boys from that same community, I think he would be happy.
Wow, that's amen and that glory to God, brother. Let me ask you something. Here on the Blessed Code, one of the things I like to learn and get from my members on the show is to understand their Blessed Code and what is a daily code that you live under.
Every single moment I pray over my son.
Wow.
Every morning I pray over him, and every night I make sure that I see him before he goes to bed.
Wow.
Every single night, it's our routine. And I remember even last night I went to the gym at a certain time, and he goes to bed around 8:30, and I made sure I came home at a particular time, and he was just drifting off. But he was waiting up for me. And he was like, Daddy, Daddy. So I always try to have that moment with him, because that's what my dad did with me.
Wow.
Every day when I left the house, my dad would say a blessing over me.
Wow.
He said, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord let his face shine upon you. And he would recite that over me every single day.
Wow.
Not even just if I'm just leaving in the morning, but anytime I left the house.
Wow.
And I would hate it. And I truly believe that it was prophetic and that God was watching over me, because there's so many times where I should have been in trouble.
Wow.
There's times where I had no explanation for why I wasn't the one arrested in the car.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And I know for a fact it was God.
Wow.
I remember driving, in the neighborhood with a bunch of my friends, and we went to go fight these other kids. And I remember the police coming up to my car, and this dude in my backseat didn't tell me he had a gun on him.
Wow.
And I had no idea, and then he put it under my seat.
Wow.
And the cop told everyone to get out of the car, everyone except for me. And they looked everywhere, and the gun is sitting right under my seat. And had he found it, he would have said that was my gun.
Wow.
And for whatever reason, God blinded him at that time.
Wow.
And I remember, and I was like, man, this is the prayer warrior of my father.
Amen.
That's been praying over me. But I'm like, why did I get myself in this situation? I don't need to be doing this, right? So I constantly do the same thing now to my son. I try to keep that tradition going.
I want to speak directly to you. And what Josiah just articulated is what we struggle with as black men, and particularly as fathers. A present father, being able to be with your children, not just there, but really being there, being present, laying hands in prayer over your children. Fellas, our children need us. We are their leaders. We are their mentors. We are their providers. They need us because without us, we know what's the option. Josiah talked about earlier around how he made a decision to pivot to the streets, to teach him, to give him guidance. And we understand what that is. We understand what that is. We have to make a decision to be men. We have to be all in. We laid down and created the child. The child deserves to have a father. And I encourage you, my brother, if there is something you are going through, something you are struggling with, there is help, there is resources. As a matter of fact, it's simple. And I encourage you to embrace the blessing to be vulnerable. As Josiah just said here and articulated briefly with his story, you can do the same thing too. And when you're released, God gives you the blessing of understanding, the blessing of increase to help you find who you are, to help you unlock and identify your purpose. Fellas, enough's enough. We understand what's going on. We understand what it is. And we continue to do the same thing every single day, but expecting different results. It's not going to happen. We can't keep getting mad at what we got because of what we don't do. We can't keep getting mad at what's going on in the streets with our kids because they're fatherless. It is on us. They need us. So, brother, I thank you, man, for sharing that because especially in the times that we're living in, our kids are lost, they're broken, they're fatherless, and it's up to us to shift that narrative, man. So,
thank you.
You know, man, I think we did it, brother. I think we unlocked the code, the survival code. And I thank you for joining me today, man. Thank you for being open and vulnerable and sharing your story. I believe this will touch and impact many. And because you had the courage today to share this, man, I'm forever grateful. And I appreciate you guys.
I appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate you. My man, great job, man.
Thank you,
Great job.
Thanks so much, bro.
All right. Thank you for joining this episode of The Blessed Code. Living by His Code is a journey full of grace, growth, and opportunities to bless others. If today's episode spoke to you, please share this powerful message and don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and connect with us on social to stay grounded, grateful, and blessed. Until next time, keep your faith strong, your heart open, and live life you're destined for. I'm your host, Melvin Rodriguez, and you just unlocked another Blessed Code.